"Captain, can I get an explanation about today's incident?" Hearing Jack's question, Valnaro wasn't impressed at all. He looked at Jack gloomily. And although it was true that he had good impression of Jack, he still didn't think that it was enough to allow Jack to question him. Feeling that the atmosphere was quite heavy, Livingstone decided that it would be better if he could do something to alleviate it. So, he spoke. "This matter seems a little serious. Why not get somewhere private to talk about it?" Valnaro thought that this was indeed a good suggestion. The question that Jack had asked was indeed quite sensitive. Furthermore, he thought that it would be good if he could also get some information about Jack while at it. So, he agreed. He then looked around and asked, "Who's going to organize somewhere private for us?" "There's no need to sweat over that. I'll arrange for that. After all, this is my place," Jack stated before turning towards Denali. She immediately understood what he was meaning and immediately left to make the necessary arrangements. On the other hand, the others were surprised to find out that this hotel actually belonged to Jack. Even though Livingstone and the others had their guesses when they were asked to come over, that was still a guess at the end of the day. So, confirming that Jack was actually the owner was definitely something that surprised them, even if it was just a little. On the other hand, Valnaro got some understanding as to why Jack had asked for the explanation. He had attacked the assailants because this was his place. Furthermore, he was asking for an explanation as to why his home was attacked. Getting that, he nodded and decided that he would follow his arrangements. After all, he still had a lot to ask about Jack. There was a fact that Jack was so strong. And another was the fact that he could already guess that the healing of Livingstone and his group of 5 had some relationship to Jack. If he could manage to get the method that Jack used to get them back on their feet, perhaps he would be able to help a lot other soldiers who were currently crippled. Not long after, Denali brought the group on the 4th floor where there was a private room. But of course, not everyone went there. It was Jack, Denali, Livingstone, Valnaro and his 2 vice captains. After everyone took their seats, Jack spoke again. "Captain, I believe that you should already know about what happened here today. This is my hotel, and it's located closer to the center of the city. But surprisingly, there were some foreigners who had managed to come to this area, completely armed, and ended up taking my customers as well as subordinates hostage. Furthermore, you should know that the casualties already exceed a dozen. So, can you please tell me what is going on here?" Jack asked bluntly. He wasn't intent on hiding or trying to mince his words at all. He wanted to know who it was behind this. And if possible, he would look for a way to deal with that person. He didn't believe that the incident on this day was just a matter of coincidence. After all, how could they get past the borders, the other provinces, the outer city, till they got this deep to assault his hotel? There had to be someone that was cooperating with them. Otherwise, it could be said that it was the government that had allowed this to happen. And if it was the government, it was true that it could be said that he couldn't compete at all. Well, that was only true for now. But, who said that he couldn't simply kill the one that had given the order directly? He would simply deal with that person and relax for a while. Although Valnaro could understand why Jack would be so bland about the question, that couldn't be said for the 2 vice captains of his. "Who the hell do you think you are to talk to our captain like that?" one of them shouted at Jack. Jack completely ignored this guy. As long as the guy didn't dare to look for trouble, Jack would let him go considering that he was here on a mission. But, if he dared to think that just because he was a soldier he could easily trash talk with him, then Jack would have no choice but to put him in his place. Seeing that he was being ignored, the guy got furious and spoke again. "You dare try ignoring me just because you think that you are strong? Then give me a chance to take care of you and show you that you are nothing." As a vice captain, his strength was definitely not simple. According to him, as long as he got a partner who was on the same level as him and had weapons, then, he would be able to deal with the 14. But, there was one thing that he didn't know. That was the fact that Jack alone had dealt with 11 of them. Although he had received a lot of support from Denali through the location of the group, it was also true that he was the one that dealt with them in the end. This time, although Jack was getting impatient with him, he didn't take any action. That was simply because Denali couldn't tolerate some nobody talking to her master like that. She knew about her master's abilities. After all, she had been observing him the time that he was dealing with the group. And, he had domed that so easily and that it could be said to be unbelievable. But all the same, she didn't care whether Jack's abilities were high or not. The thing that she cared the most was the fact that there was some nobody here that was trying to talk down on her master. She stood up from her seat and looked straight at the vice captain and spoke coldly. "You better shut that trap of yours or learn how to speak with my boss. A person on your level shouldn't even think of challenging me. let alone my boss. If you don't believe, just continue and I'll prove that to you. Denali cared nonetheless that he was a soldier. As long as he dared to offend her master, she would definitely not show mercy. The vice captain felt the cold glare that he was receiving from Denali and shuddered. That was something instinctive. He was suddenly feeling that he had been tossed onto an ice cellar. The sudden fear that enveloped him made his heart race for a moment. But as a warrior that had been to a battlefield, he managed to regain some of his composure and looked at Denali coldly. He was just about to step forward to test her abilities and prove that she was nothing when he was suddenly stopped by Valnaro. That's enough. Valnaro's voice was resolute, leaving no chance for negotiation at all. The vice captain had no choice but to grit his teeth and retreat. But all the same, he still threw a hateful glare towards Jack and Denali. Valnaro himself had felt the aura that had been emitted by Denali, and he could immediately tell that she was so strong that, if his vice captain tried fighting it out with her, he would lose completely. But he was left wondering just how strong Jack was. After all, Denali claimed that she was weaker than Jack, yet she could already make him feel the danger. What about Jack? Still, since there was something that he wanted to know from Jack, he didn't want any conflicts with him at the moment. As for knowing what happened here, he would simply look at the CCTV footage after he left here. To tell you the truth, Jack, we ourselves are not sure about what happened for them to be able to reach here. But that would be investigated and the results will be out soon, Valnaro stated. Then, the issue about the police force not acting, although there was an issue here, they were not allowed to intervene. These guys attacked with the intention of attracting the attention of the military force. So, they had asked the police to retreat from the area. Otherwise, there would be some people that would end up dead, Valnaro continued. Hearing this, Jack's eyes narrowed. He thought deeply about it and decided to leave the issue of the police aside. But, about what they wanted, that was definitely something that he had to know. What was the reason as to why they picked my hotel out of all those that are present in the city? Not to mention the fact that it's true that my hotel isn't the one with the most population in the area, or the only building that they could easily control with their number, Jack asked. Valnaro's expression was quite strange at the moment. After all, it was like he was being interrogated here. According to the normal situations, he should be the one that should be doing that at the moment. But with Jack's strength and what he wanted from him, the truth was that he could only bear with the situation and say what he could say. As for other secrets, he was going to seal his lips about that. I'm not sure why they targeted your hotel. The answer can only come out after we complete our investigation. But then, the reason as to why they had a need for hostages, that is something that is considered confidential to the government. Valnaro released a frustrated sigh as he replied. Jack looked at him, and knowing that he wasn't going to say a word about it now, he decided to put the topic aside for the moment. But still, he spoke. Okay then. I would like Captain to inform me if you find something. After all, I don't like it when someone simply pokes at me just because. As far as I remember, I don't think I have ever offended someone. So, if there's someone involved, he would have to pay the price. Valnaro could feel chills running down his spine as he looked at Jack's cold expression that showed that he wasn't joking, but still, he wondered just what Jack had gone through at his age for him to behave in such a manner. All the same, he looked at Jack and spoke seriously. I know that you are angry about today's event. That's something completely understandable. But, I hope that if you receive the information, you won't break the law. Jack simply chuckled when he heard this. I can't promise you about that though. After all, it will depend with the level of provocation that he has made. Jack had no intention of speaking any further nonsense here. So, he decided to leave and meet the top management of the hotel. He still had to go to the Eden residential building. Perhaps there might be another force targeting it? I will be on my way then. Thank you for your time, Captain. Jack got to his feet and was ready to leave. Seeing this, the captain had a bitter smile on his face. If Jack was just a nobody, he would have simply beaten him up due to his attitude. But not to mention the fact that Jack had taken care of the criminals, he was also stronger. As for using the number advantage to deal with him, that was impossible. At the end of the day, Jack wasn't a criminal here at all. Wait a moment, Jack. Valnaro hurriedly called at Jack. What's it, Captain? Although Jack had an inkling about what he was going to ask, he still waited for him to say it out himself. You should know about it already. I would like to talk about Livingstone and the others. Valnaro went straight to the point. Since Jack was a straightforward person, he might as well do the same. Upon hearing what Valnaro was asking about, Jack wasn't surprised to say the least. It was normal that as a leader, Valnaro would try to find a way to improve the strength of his force. And although it was true that he couldn't raise the dead, as long as he could prevent the early retirement of his soldiers due to the injuries, his force would be higher as compared to the others. In this way, they would have a great advantage over their enemies. This was something that Valnaro was willing to pay the necessary price to acquire it. After all, there was a fact that the secret that Jack used would be of great help to the country. Jack was thinking about denying the issue. After all, this concerned his secret and his strength after all. So, he was definitely not willing to expose it to someone that might fight against him in the future due to the collision of interests. But there was something that he had noted. That was the fact that this was actually a chance for him to get his hands on some of the things that he couldn't do so easily. But, he would have to take the necessary precautions. He could only distribute the bod strengthening solution and not the pills. In this way, he could at least reserve something that could be used in the future to exploit the military. But, that would only happen if he had gotten something else that could replace the body strengthening pill. And, he wasn't afraid that he wouldn't get it. After all, he had the system. It was just a matter of when that would happen. As he thought of that, Jack looked at Valnaro and asked, "What price are you willing to pay for it?" To say the least, Valnaro was surprised that Jack didn't try playing dumb about it and just asked about the price that they were willing to pay for that. Although he was pleased with the way that things were going, there was a certain someone that didn't think that what Jack had asked was reasonable. "What do you mean by what price we are willing to pay? We are from the military. We do ensure your security, and that is the reason as to why you are here now. So, it should be your honor to help us with the situation." Of course, the one that had spoken this time was the vice captain, who seemed to be having a big mouth at the moment. Jack's expression darkened at that moment. It seemed that this guy thought that he was far superior than Jack simply because he was a soldier. But, that was completely wrong. He had gotten the wrong target in this situation. Jack was already tired since young because his half-siblings always got onto his nerves as they acted almighty in front of him. And looking at the vice captain, the way that he was putting on a self-righteous expression on his face, Jack was immediately ticked off. And before Valnaro could say a word about the sudden change, Jack had already made a move. He appeared in front of the vice captain and smashed his head. The vice captain, who wasn't expecting this, was immediately blown away. The moment that he landed onto the ground, Jack had already arrived before him. He picked him off the ground by the neck and stared directly into his eyes. His eyes were currently cold that they immediately froze the vice captain. The guy had absolutely not expected that Jack would actually make a move on him. Furthermore, he had thought that he was strong enough to deal with Jack. But, the current situation that he was in at the moment was enough proof that he was being delusional. It seemed that he had thought much about. In the end, he couldn't even withstand a single blow from Jack. "Can you repeat what it was that you were trying to say before?" Jack asked coldly. How could he let some nobody to step on his dignity? It was his honor to help the military. To hell with that. Although he loved his country, it wasn't to the point that he would actually give away something that he had gotten with a lot of effort. Furthermore, all these fights were due to benefits. The enmity all due to the fact that there was someone that was preventing others from getting what they wanted. And, he was sure that Azima had also attacked other countries to get what they wanted. Valnaro wanted to make a move and prevent Jack from continuing to attack when he was suddenly blocked by Denali. He wasn't the only one though, because even his other vice-captain had been stopped by Livingstone. Currently, Valnaro's expression wasn't that good. After all, Jack attacking one of his subordinates was the same as looking down on him. Furthermore, Livingstone's action made his expression turn uglier. After all, he was previously a soldier, but he was now standing opposite to them. Valnaro looked at Jack. When he saw that had no intention to do anything other than giving him a beating, he decided to let things play as they were. At the end of the day, it was true that it was his subordinate that had actually spoken rudely first. Moreover, this would just be a good chance to make sure that he wouldn't be arrogant next time. With that thought in mind, he waved at the other vice-captain and told him to retreat. He still thought that getting the secret that Jack used to heal Livingstone and the others was the priority. So, he could as well wait for Jack to complete what he was doing so that they could continue talking about what they were talking about. On the other side, Jack cared nonetheless about what Valnaro was thinking about. As long as he didn't get involved at the moment, that was good for him at the moment. He could deal with the guy first before dealing with the others. The vice-captain, who was expecting that the captain and his colleague would come to his rescue, despaired when he saw that they had no intention to do that at all. He was just about to ask when suddenly, the grip around his neck tightened. The complete cut-off of air made the vice captain widen his eyes. He frantically tried getting out of Jack's grip, but there was no success. He tried attacking Jack, but all his attempts were futile. He couldn't even manage to make Jack struggle, holding him in place in the air. "I asked you a question. Perhaps you didn't hear me?" Jack's cold voice reached the vice captain's ears. This sent chills down his spine. Although he was a proud person, not only due to his strength, but due to his position as well. But now, none of them seemed useful to be able to get him out of the position that he was in. Although he was currently bleeding due to the punch that had broken his nose, he forced himself to shake his head. Seeing this, Jack smiled and asked, "You don't want to repeat what you were saying before, even after I have asked you to do so?" At this point, the vice captain wanted to cry. Let alone breathing, he couldn't speak. So, what was Jack talking about, him not wanting to speak? Although he too liked bullying others, he had no choice but to complain that he was being bullied. Even Valnaro and the other three had no other choice but to think that Jack was really evil at the moment. He was after all giving that guy a very hard time. Seeing that the guy had almost passed out due to suffocation, Jack snorted and threw him on the floor. Although he was angered by the guy's constant provocation, that wasn't something that he thought that it was important at all. He then turned towards Valnaro and said, "Captain, I hope that you don't mind my actions there. This guy simply got to my nerves and I couldn't take it anymore." Knowing that bickering with Jack wasn't important, Valnaro simply shrugged at him and said, "Well, I have no choice but to admit that he really deserved a beating. As long as he wasn't killed, you could have beaten him more." Although that wasn't the truth, Valnaro thought that this would make Jack forget about the issue at the moment. Jack smiled when he heard this. He said, "If that's the case, I will beat him up again when I will be leaving." Valnaro felt his lips twitching when he heard that. But still, he thought that Jack was joking about it. So, he waved his hand dismissively and said, "Let's talk about what we were talking about before." "Okay then." Jack nodded. He was more than happy to ask for the benefits from Valnaro. So, leaving what had happened behind was more than welcomed by him. After he took a seat, he decided that he had to go straight to the point immediately rather than talking too much. "So, what are you going to offer for the solution to the treatment of the injuries of your soldiers?" Valnaro smiled and said, "Why don't you state the properties of the solution so that we can know how it works? Furthermore, I would like to know if there are any side effects that are involved in between." Jack thought that what he said made sense. So, he looked at Livingstone and waited for him to speak. At the end of the day, he was the one with first-hand experience. Knowing what Jack was implying, he immediately got to his feet and decided to demonstrate his current strength. He looked at the other vice captain that hadn't been involved in the fight and motioned for him to have a spar with him. The room itself was wide enough in that, even if they engaged in a fight, as long as they didn't go all out, they would fight just fine as long as the tables and the chairs were moved to the side. When they made the preparations, the two engaged in a fierce, and although it was true that the vice captain wasn't holding back, when he faced Livingstone, he immediately noticed that he had no advantage whatsoever at all. He was being suppressed by Livingstone. And in less than 2 minutes, he had already been beaten to the ground. Although it was true that he hadn't gone all out, the same could be said for Livingstone. Valnaro and the others were greatly impressed by what they saw. They knew that Livingstone was just a normal soldier before today. Furthermore, every captain and his vice captains were nothing but simple. The positions were not decided by simply the management and commanding ability. But, they also looked at the fighting ability of the person as well. Though, this only applied on the teams that were involved in dangerous situations like the team that was led by Valnaro. In other words, the vice captains were stronger than normal soldiers. But even so, the vice captain was beaten down in less than 2 minutes. And, Livingstone didn't seem to have worked hard. "What is the secret?" Valnaro was amazed. He looked at Jack with shining eyes and asked. Jack smiled in return. He sat down again and stated, "It won't be considered a secret anymore if I talk about it, right? In any case, I can give it to you at the right price as I stated before." Hearing what Jack had said, although Valnaro wasn't happy, he still thought that it was better than nothing. Furthermore, there was no guarantee that Jack wouldn't agree to give the secret as long as he paid the right price for it. So, he sighed and asked, "You can state your conditions. I can see that it seems to be good enough. Not to talk about the fact that it can heal the injuries, it can also improve the strength of the person that uses the secret of yours. So, as long as it is an acceptable price, we can trade." Jack thought for a moment and said, "You should know the importance of the secret that I'm going to reveal to you." By now, there's nobody else other than those that are part of my team. So, you shouldn't worry about the fact that there would be others that have the same thing. Well, that's unless you leak the solution that I'm going to give you. But of course, that's unless you don't mind having your enemies getting their hands on it. As he spoke, Jack took out the solution that he was having inside his pocket. He showed it to Valnaro. Valnaro took the small bottle from Jack's hand and observed it carefully. He couldn't detect anything special from the small bottle and neither from the liquid inside it. He was getting doubtful about the fact that this small liquid inside the bottle could actually do something as magical as healing and strengthening a person. Livingstone could immediately see through his doubts. So, he came forward and spoke, "Captain, you don't need to worry about that. I myself and the other 5 have tried it out. In fact, the other 20 have already taken the solution. And the results are obvious the moment that the solution is taken. Furthermore, till this point, there have been no side effects that have been noticed." Valnaro's eyes narrowed as he scrutinized the solution inside further. He then looked at Jack and asked, "Are you sure that there are no side effects? After all, it is hard to believe that there is something out there that can do something incredible yet it has no side effects." "I know your doubts, and if you say side effects, I have to agree that there is a side effect once a person takes it," Jack stated. Jack's words surprised the people around, especially Livingstone. So far, he himself hadn't experienced any side effects. Could it be that Jack had lied to him and there were side effects that would appear only later? But he didn't think that this was possible. From Jack's character, he didn't seem like someone who would really do something like that. He was sure that Jack would have told him in advance that the solution had some side effects. So, he decided to wait for Jack's explanation. "Once you take the solution, you sure will gain the strength in just a few seconds after consumption. If you are injured internally, that is something that you won't need to worry about because it will be healed in that moment," Jack explained. What follows after a person takes the solution is that the person would be filled with great amount of strength, and it would need that person to vent it out. That is perhaps what can be considered as a side effect. Valnaro's and the others' mouths hang open as they looked at Jack weirdly. Although they had thought that there was something serious according to the way that Jack's expression was, they never thought that at the end of the day, the expression that he was talking about was simply venting out the extra energy. Jack ignored their gazes and continued. "For someone with a weak physique, the results would be the same as I have stated. But the difference would be the fact that, after venting the extra energy, that person would need a few hours of rest." Although he was saying venting the extra energy, the truth was that one's increase in activity was actually due to the fact that the body wanted to speed up the consumption of the energy that was brought into the body by the body strengthening solution. As for those that were already stronger than the standard adults, the result would be that they would only need to vent out. But that's all that there is. There would be no weakening effect. As for those that are far stronger than normal, there would be nothing that they would experience other than the increase in their strength. I guess that you now understand the side effects that I was talking about. Valnaro looked at Jack. To say the least, he was impressed. From Jack's words, it was obvious that he had already done a lot of research on the solution before he distributed it. He was now wondering what batch he was in, but at least, he was sure that he was in the second category, those that were stronger than the normal adults. Perhaps he was stronger than the normal strong guys. He couldn't help but have some fantasies. "Go ahead and take it. It will be better if you can use it. In that way, you can easily know the importance of the solution. So, when I mention the price, you would know what we are talking about," Jack stated. Valnaro nodded and did just as Jack had asked. He removed the cork of the small bottle and gulped the small amount of liquid in the bottle in a single gulp. The next second, just like all the others that had experienced taking the body-strengthening solution, he felt the warm current coursing through his body. Then, he felt explosive strength in his muscles. This was an extreme pleasing moment. A moment where his mind relaxed from all the stress that came from the issues concerning his work all disappeared. He let out a comfortable sigh. Then in the next moment, he felt that he had too much strength in his body. He really wanted to fight someone so that he could vent out. It was also at this moment that he remembered Jack's words. It was that those that were stronger than normal adults would have to vent out. He had thought that he was perhaps stronger than the normal strong guys. But now, it seemed that he had thought much about that. And, if Jack could tell the reaction that came from the strong person taking the solution, didn't that imply that there was a person that was far stronger than him? And, he was wondering just where Jack had gotten him from. He looked at his vice-captains. But, none of them would be able to handle his current strength. After all, he could feel that his strength had actually doubled at the moment. As for Livingstone, he wasn't sure if he was stronger than him or not. Perhaps he could actually win. Thinking of this, Valnaro, who had already gotten to his feet, was just about to ask Livingstone for a spar when he was stopped by Jack. Livingstone won't be able to handle you. That solution will increase your strength by 2. And as I say 2, I mean that it's equal to the strength of 2 adults. In other words, if an adult is equal to 50 kilograms, the solution would increase your strength by 100 kilogram in total. You would be as strong as 150 kilogram, Jack explained. In other words, the stronger that you were initially before taking the solution, the stronger you would be as compared to the others. That means, your base strength matters the most. And, as a captain, you were obviously stronger than Livingstone when the both of you had yet to take the solution. In other words, the solution increases the strength of all those that take it by the same amount. Since he was no match for you before, now that you have taken the same solution as him, he is obviously no match for you now. When he heard this, Valnaro understood. But he still wanted to vent his energy, so, who would he fight against? Just as he was wondering, Jack looked at Denali and nodded at her. Although he wasn't sure how strong she was, he was sure that she could handle a person like the captain. Denali nodded and got up from her seat. Then, Jack looked at Livingstone and the 2 vice captains and pointed at the tables. In other words, they had to create even more space because those that were fighting were both strong. The moment that the both got to the center of the room, they both made a move. The both of them had great skills, and so, there was bound to be a great fight that would occur, or so Jack thought. The moment that the two met, Valnaro struck first. Although he knew that Denali was a woman, the fact that Jack thought that she was stronger than Livingstone was enough to tell him that he was never supposed to underestimate her. So, he was going all out from the start. He clenched his right hand into a fist that went straight for Denali's face. But, that was the biggest mistake that he could make. Although Denali was strong and was extremely loyal to Jack, a fact that still remained was that she was still a woman with her own life. And she would react just like how a normal girl would. They treasured their looks the most. And, what was the thing that made them angry? That was the fact that someone dared to try messing with their faces. So, when she saw the fist that was heading for her face, Denali's expression changed. She was cold at the moment. She decided that she had to beat up this guy and teach him a good lesson. Although she knew that in a fight, there was no gender, she still wasn't impressed that the first thing that Valnaro targeted was her face. So, she stopped attacking and received Valnaro's fist head-on. The moment that it arrived in front of her, she used her left hand to grab it, completely stopping it in its tracks. She didn't give Valnaro a chance to be surprised as a kick immediately came. It landed directly on his chest. Valnaro's eyes widened in pressure and disbelief. What followed was that he was blown away like a kite with a broken string. Bang! In the next moment, he smashed against the wall of the room, and as he dropped onto the ground, he almost vomited blood as his internal organs had been shaken. Denali, you were supposed to give him a chance to vent his strength. Jack, although surprised by her prowess, reminded. Sorry boss, I forgot. Denali smiled apologetically at him and responded. But Jack believed none of her words. At the moment, he was simply thinking, you forgot? Even a minute hasn't gone by since you came to an agreement? You forgot? Even a minute hasn't gone by since you came to an agreement? Jack shook his head in the end because there was nothing that he could do about the thing that had already happened. He could only hope that Valnaro wasn't injured that much because it would prevent him from properly venting the energy inside his body. He looked at Valnaro, who was struggling to get back to his feet. He really looked miserable even in his clothes. But all the same, he still managed to get back to his feet. He then looked at his 2 vice captains that were standing in the distance and asked, you guys can't help me when I was down. Sorry captain. But, aren't you venting? We are not strong enough to help you vent out the excess energy in your body. The 2 replied as if they were both thinking of the same thing. Valnaro could only shake his head in the end. Although it was true that Denali had given him a good kick, it was also true that she had controlled her strength well. She made sure not to give Valnaro a big injury. She simply made him feel the pain. But still, Valnaro was feeling great pain. He was sure that if he had yet to take the body-strengthening solution, he would have several bones of his broken by the kick. His back was now drenched in cold sweat as he thought of the time that he had been blocked by Denali. Had he taken action and forced her hand, in what condition would he have been in at the moment? Just thinking of that made him sweat even further. Can you continue venting? Jack's voice reached his ears at this moment. When he thought of facing Denali once again, He felt his body shuddering. It was clear that now, he was completely afraid of Denali due to her strength. And, he thought of the moment that she had said that she wasn't as strong as Jack. Now, he wondered just how strong was if Denali was a monster of that level. It's no wonder that they could take care of the 13 without any casualties among the hostages. Valnaro thought to himself. I'm not going to fight her anymore. Valnaro shook his head as he replied to Jack. Huh? You are not going to vent anymore? Jack was surprised by the reply. Could it be that he was too injured that he couldn't fight anymore? Jack wondered to himself as he observed Valnaro. But no matter how he looked at him, Jack thought that the guy was okay. After all, he was a soldier. And, there was no way that the injury that he had suffered at the moment was enough to make a soldier like him to get out of a battle. As if seeing through Jack's thoughts, Valnaro sighed and said, It's not that I don't want to vent, there's nothing that I can vent at the moment. It's like that kick made my body consume all that excess energy in my body. Oh, that works too. Jack's eyes shone intensely. He had just discovered something here. It was a fact that there was a lot of energy that the body needed to consume. As such, it was advisable for a person to increase the body activities. In this way, the metabolic activities of the body would increase. But, it seemed that there was something that he had ignored before. That was the fact that, the body could be stimulated by receiving injuries. Although on the surface Valnaro looked okay, it was a fact that he had internal injuries. To heal the injuries, energy was required. As such, the body would have to increase its activities to acquire even more energy. And, that was what had just happened to Valnaro. His body had consumed a lot of the excess energy. In the process, he got stronger and at the same time, the injuries that he had suffered were getting healed at a fast rate. Valnaro managed to realize that the pain that was intense a moment ago had greatly diminished. He was puzzled. But in the end, he could only relate this to the solution that he had taken. As such, he was even more determined to get his hands on the solution. He wondered just how strong he could become if he took 10 bottles of that solution. Seeing Valnaro's shining eyes, Jack could tell that he had realized what was happening. And, the greedy light that passed through his eyes for a moment, Jack saw it clearly. Jack shook his head and spoke. You shouldn't be thinking about taking several bottles of the solution. That's something impossible. In other words, it is only effective once. The moment that you take the second one, it is no different from wasting it. Jack's words immediately extinguished the fantasies that Valnaro was having at that moment. But all the same, he was both relieved and curious at the same time. Relieved that Jack, who was the source of the solution, would use several bottles of the solution to get extremely strong. In this way, if he decided to start a massacre in the city, it would be very hard to stop him. At the same time, he was curious about how Jack and Denali got this strong. It was obvious that they didn't depend mainly on the solution for them to be this strong. Perhaps Jack had a better solution that could do something better? At the thought of this, Valnaro's eyes lit again. He wondered how much Jack would ask them to pay so that he could release the solution. Alright then. Let's talk about the solution. What's the price that you would like us to pay for you to give us the formula of the solution? Valnaro took a seat after the room was reorganized and asked. Jack looked at him and shook his head. The solution is not something that can be mass-produced. But, I can promise you a certain amount in a certain period. Although I'm sure that there are many soldiers, I believe that you won't simply give the solution like this to all the soldiers. So, I believe that I can keep up the supply of solution. As for the formula, forget about that. It's simply because I'm the only person that can produce the solution, Jack stated. All the same, although Valnaro nodded, he of course didn't believe what Jack had said. How is that possible? It wasn't like the solution needed some superpowers to create, right? As for the issue of mass production, he could agree. At the end of the day, something as heaven-defying as the solution wasn't something that could be easily produced, he believed. Now to the price. The first thing that I would want from you would be a permission for me to get access to the firearms. Jack stated his first condition. Firearms? That's quite difficult. Valnaro narrowed his eyes as he said, if it was before he knew that Jack had a solution that could make people strong, he would have easily agreed to the conditions. But now, things were completely different now. Jack getting the guns was akin to allowing him to create a special force. Not only would their strength be top-notch, but they would be having weapons that would increase their strength. As the one that controlled the solution, it was obvious that he could easily make a big army of soldiers at the level of Livingstone. As for the matter concerning skills, once he got soldiers like Livingstone who had gotten out of the battlefield due to the injuries that they had suffered, he would be able to make up for that. As for the newbies, they could be trained. At the end of a few years, Jack could have a big force that could compete against the country. And, although Jack had yet to show that he was against Azima, who knew if he would change his mind in the future. How difficult is that? You should know the value of the body strengthening solution. So, you should know that the permission to get firearms is definitely not enough to pay for something as good as the solution, Jack stated. You should know that I'm only receiving the permission to have a part of my security guards to use the firearms. As for the price to acquire them, I'm the one that's going to pay for it. I'm quite an ambitious person. I'm planning to monopolize a few industries in the country. As such, I'm bound to have enemies from every corner of the business world. And, if I can get an enemy that would use the method like the one where my hotel was attacked like this, having several of my customers and staff killed, that is something that I won't tolerate. So, it would be better for me to increase the security of my businesses, Jack concluded. Valnaro thought about it and saw that it made sense. Even he himself knew that Jack was right. But, there was always a risk that came with having someone strong enough to be a danger to the country. It wasn't like he had stated that he would be their enemy. But, there was always a risk that was present. They were all humans at the end of the day. After thinking for a long while, Valnaro looked at Jack and asked, about the ones that are under you, the ones that are going to get the solution or have already gotten it. I wonder if there are many of them. Jack could see through the worries that Valnaro was having. He chuckled and stated, you should know that I'm not an idiot. I definitely cannot give the solution to just anyone that wants to work for me. To be clear, there are only a few people that have gotten the solution or know about its existence. And, all of them are specially selected in such a way that it's believed that they won't use their strength for heinous acts. At the end of the day, I myself wouldn't want someone betraying me. So, you should know that the same would apply to the weapons that I would get. That implies that there would only be a few that would get them, Jack said. Valnaro nodded in understanding. That was to be expected of someone that had the ambitions of monopolizing several markets. Livingstone on the other hand was touched. He had met with Jack. But, on the very same day that they had met, he had given him the solution that changed his life. Could it be that he was lying to Valnaro? But that was something that he himself doubted. As he thought about himself, he was someone that had morals. As for the 5 that he had brought, they were all that were like him. Thinking about the moment that Jack had stated that the ones that he was going to bring might be rejected, he thought deeply about it. Then, he looked at Denali and realized something. The both of them had met with Denali before they received the solution. Furthermore, Jack had said the previous day that they would have to meet Denali before they got accepted. So, although he was still not sure about it, he thought that Denali might have some ability to look into their character. How many do you have so far? Valnaro asked. Not many. I only have 225 people that are part of the special team and need weapons. Jack replied nonchalantly. Valnaro began doubting Jack's view of the world. If it was something like $200, then that was indeed something small and couldn't be considered big to someone that was wealthy enough to easily fork out thousands of dollars. But the same concept couldn't be applied on the soldiers at all. Each soldier here was having a lot of strength that was boosted thanks to the body strengthening solution. And now, Jack wanted them to have guns. That was akin to adding wings on a tiger. So, although 225 men seemed a small number, it wasn't. Valnaro himself was leading a company that consisted of 200 soldiers, him and the 2 vice captains included. So, if Jack's over 200 men armed with weapons met with his current soldiers, then he would definitely lose completely. Not to mention that the other side had greater strength, which both applied to speed, reaction and the body senses. They would definitely be able to deal with his company even before his company did anything to them. He sighed in defeat. Perhaps he didn't know how some people saw the world that they were in at the moment. But, one thing was for sure, he would have to look deep into Jack's background as soon as he got out of here. He had to make sure that everything was in position, and perhaps, if he could find that Jack's background wasn't big, he could look for ways that he could use to make sure that Jack didn't go against the country at all. Alright then. I'll arrange that for you, but, I just hope that you'll be able to control the men that will be holding the guns. Valnaro sighed and said. Worry not, they won't be going against their role. Furthermore, they won't be the only ones. In the future, there would definitely be more of them joining. Jack stated with a smile. Valnaro almost vomited blood although he had already had his internal injuries healed. Now, he really wanted to shout, what do you mean that more would join in the future? What I'm trying to imply here is that your group is already big for a private army. Now you're saying that you will add more in the future? Although he would have wanted to shout that, He thought that it wasn't that good for the moment. He wanted to complete the negotiation with Jack so that he could leave here and investigate Jack. He looked at Jack and said helplessly, "What is the other one?" "The other one is something that I haven't thought of at the moment. Simply put, I would like to get help from the military in the future. But be assured that I know my limits and won't request for something that would be considered too much," Jack replied after thinking for a while. Then, he continued, "I would be giving you the solution in weekly period. The amount that would be distributed would depend on the production, as it's not something that I can guarantee that you can get 100 tomorrow or something." Jack was obviously making it look like the production of the body strengthening solution was so hard. But in fact, it was something so simple. As for the cost, he could afford to buy the ingredients for the production of pills that could be able to be used by 100,000 people. Well, that was considering that he was being conservative with the money that he had on him. All the same, this was profit all over. But nobody could say that Jack was simply being a profiteer. For one, he didn't pick the pill recipe. He was the one that worked hard during the Ultimate Championship to get the recipe. Furthermore, the system was something that he was lucky enough to get. And luck was part of a person's strength at the end of the day. So, he was simply making sure that he could get the maximum out of the body strengthening solution. Although the pills were not expensive and neither were the production procedures, the most expensive thing there was definitely the recipe. Hearing that Jack had yet to think of something to ask of them, Valnaro couldn't help but have his lips twitch for a moment. He knew that owing Jack a favor was definitely something so expensive. But, as he thought about what they were receiving, it was obvious that the body strengthening solution was just as expensive. After a while, he looked at Jack and nodded his head. "Okay then. But, there are things that I will have to talk with the higher-ups first before agreeing to it. Although I have already agreed, you wanted to request for something from the military as a whole and not the company that I'm leading. As for the issue concerning the guns, that is something that I can take care of for you." Jack nodded in response. He knew that his request was definitely not something that a captain could approve. At the end of the day, he was going to make a request to the military of the whole country. The reason as to why he could do that, or, he thought that it was supposed to be that way, it was because his body strengthening solution could be used by the soldiers all over the country. Although there would be restrictions about the way that the body strengthening solution would be supplied, it wouldn't prevent the soldiers from all over the country from using them. Again, he was sure that there would be some people that would use the solution for their personal gain. That was one of the reasons as to why he was making it seem that the number of the solutions that could be distributed would only be small. "Okay then. Now that we have come to an agreement, I guess I can get out of here and look into the issue concerning the attack on the hotel." Valnaro got to his feet as he spoke. Jack nodded as he too stood up. Then, he thought of something and said, "Captain, I would like to request for something. Once you find that there is someone that was involved in helping the 14 to reach the hotel to attack, please inform me about it." Valnaro was expecting that because Jack had already mentioned it before. Although he knew that this was something that he wasn't supposed to tell to a civilian like Jack, he decided that he would make it an exception. "You've got my word. As soon as we find anything fishy going on, I will let you know about it," Valnaro stated. This time, he didn't mention anything about killing the culprit or not if he was found. He could tell that Jack was angry at the fact that his hotel had been attacked. As such, he would definitely do something that was beyond letting the law take its course. All the same, even Valnaro himself wasn't impressed by the person behind the attack, to say the least. There were several people that had died although they were not involved. So, he wouldn't mind if such a person died in the end. Well, all of this is only if there was actually someone that was pulling the strings from behind. As such, the negotiation ended there. Valnaro went to meet with the soldiers that were waiting outside of the room to give the report about what had happened. On the other hand, all the top management of the hotel had already gathered together in the conference hall of the hotel. Although most of them had suffered from the shock of being attacked or seeing others being killed, they still came together after finding that the one that had saved them was the new boss. Jack went to the conference room together with Denali. As for Livingstone and the others, they could only wait and go with Jack to the Eden residential building. That was simply because he thought that, if it was a person that was specifically targeting him, he might as well take the precautions as early as possible. Although it seemed impossible that there was a person out there that knew about what assets Jack owned due to the fact that Denali had restricted his information, there was no telling if there was a person that could get it. Nobody was omnipotent at the end of the day. After getting into the conference room, Jack looked at the people who were seated around the main table. Each of them seemed depressed. But of course, there were some that were trying their best to hide their expressions or emotions at the moment. When they noticed that Jack had entered, although most of the people here were surprised by the fact that he was the one that had saved them, after the manager confirmed that Jack was the boss, they all stood up in respect. Jack didn't mind though. He looked at them and said, "You can all sit down. There's no need to be tense. I know that most of you are currently facing some difficulties, especially emotionally." While Jack was speaking to the top management staff of the hotel, Valnaro on the other hand was looking at the reports that had been hurriedly prepared. The reports basically contained the information that had been gathered here on how the things had taken place or what was said here. After reading things through, he found that the information was simply the same as the one that he had received when he was standing out of the hotel. "Alright, bring me the CCTV footage," Valnaro stated. Although it was true that he could see that there were several mentions of Jack and Denali, he still thought that it would be good if he could see the action by himself. Not long after, Valnaro sat in front of a screen as he looked at the action. The 14 had not deleted anything because they wanted to leave the video as a message after they succeeded. But in the end, they were killed. Forget about even sending a message to their enemies. The only use of the video now was to show the one that had taken care of them. Valnaro watched everything closely. And the video showed that there was someone that was being killed or knocked unconscious. But in the end, they couldn't see anybody there. In other words, the person that had been doing all the killing was invisible. At this point, had they not gotten the information from the witnesses, they wouldn't have known that the one that had taken care of the 14 was Jack accompanied by his PA. At this moment, the only thing that Valnaro could think was simply, does he also have a solution that makes one invisible? Valnaro was getting delighted when he suddenly remembered that there was definitely someone that had seen Jack. In other words, Jack wasn't invisible at all when he was dealing with the 14. So, how was he invisible in the footage? After thinking for a while, he looked at one of the soldiers and asked them to show him the footage of the past few minutes. After a while, the footage was in front of him. He watched it calmly but at the same time expectantly. But he was surprised that he could see that Jack was present in the footage. Furthermore, he didn't seem to be concealing anything at all. Thinking that something was wrong, Valnaro went back to watching the first footage. In the end, no matter how he looked at it, he found that there was nothing that seemed out of place other than the fact that there were two invisible people killing or knocking people unconscious. And what made Valnaro's lips twitch was the fact that he could clearly see the weapons that the person was carrying. The walkie-talkie that hung on the shoulder and the pistol that was being held by the invisible belt. As he looked at it, he could see that it was as if there was a person that had come with an eraser and decided to erase the person, leaving behind the weapons. This can only be a single thing. There's someone that has great computer skills and can easily make the video here as he or she likes. And that person's skills are so high that they could make it look like the video that they were watching was the original one and wasn't edited, Valnaro stated. But Captain, who is it that can do that? All the computer experts of our company have tried looking but they found that there were no loopholes at all. The vice captain that was beaten up by Jack stated. Although the company was for the soldiers, there were other people that had several skills that were from the other fields. Moreover, they were considered experts in their fields. All these experts in the computer path had tried to look into the video to see if it was edited. But in the end, they found absolutely nothing. Although they were sure that the video was edited because no matter what, there were people that had seen Jack and Denali taking action. On the footage, they were both invisible. Valnaro could only narrow his eyes as he thought of something. Perhaps this guy has more to him and is not as simple as he looks. Perhaps he has a team that is so good in the matters concerning technology, other than the science department. As he said these words, Valnaro now began doubting that they would really find anything on Jack. He could easily have the video of him fighting edited to the extent that his best men couldn't find anything wrong with it with their skills. But there was something wrong when one looked at it. So, he could perhaps have had his information hidden. Or, he might have left behind fake information. At the end of the day, he was greatly skilled. What Valnaro didn't know was the fact that he was completely right about everything other than the person behind all of this. Instead of a team, the video and the information about Jack had all been dealt with by Denali. If he knew about such a thing, Valnaro would surely go out of his way to try recruiting her. After all, Denali was a person that had both strength and skills. If it was the normal attacks, she was good. And if it was the cyber attack, she could be even better. Perhaps even espionage using hacking could be possible. Leave this issue to the side at the moment. Try to find any evidence of the occurrence here today. The footage should be saved so that we can carry further investigation after we are done, Valnaro stated. Yes, Captain. The soldiers around him replied. Oh, one more thing. I want the 3 that were found unconscious interrogated as soon as possible. And I want results. As for the fact that they always don't talk, I don't want to hear of such a result. I want to get the reason as to why they chose the hotel as their target no matter what. As he said this, Valnaro was solemn. He knew that the information that was related to the incident here was going to be important. Although it might not be that important because he could tell that the group that was sent over had been sent to their deaths, at least he was sure that he could get a traitor in the country. And he wouldn't need to take action at all. He would simply let Jack take care of that traitor while he watched from the sides, trying to get a grasp of Jack's real strength. Yes, Captain. Knowing that Valnaro was serious about what he had just said, the soldiers dared not to waste any more time and decided to take action immediately. Jack didn't know what was happening on Valnaro's side, but he could already imagine it all because it was something that he had asked Denali to take care of. Although it was true that he had asked her to take care of the situation, he never asked her to make fun of Valnaro and his group of specialists. But if he knew that this was what had happened, he would definitely thank her greatly. Alright, I won't beat around the bush at the moment and I'll be clear with you. I know that there have been several casualties here. But I don't really know at the moment what happened here and what was the reason behind it, Jack continued. And as such, I would like all of you to take a break of 1 week. Don't come to work during this 1 week. You can simply relax and try getting yourselves together. As for the matters concerning your salaries and so on, there's no need to worry about that. Jack had come to this decision. Although he knew that closing the hotel would definitely cause several losses, to him, that was nothing at all. He could recover all of that with the help of the system. Not to mention the fact that there was currently a somber atmosphere here in the hotel. He would have to wait till the situation calmed down. And he thought that a single week was enough for all his staff members to get over themselves before he began making the necessary changes. The over 30 people in the conference room were greatly surprised by Jack's words. They had never seen a boss like him before. He could actually be like this to his employees. Now, they were wondering why he had not appeared earlier. Perhaps their situation would have been better than currently. Jack waited till the noise in the room subsided before he spoke again. Now, before you leave, I would like to get all the information that I can get about the victims of today's assaults. Their families will receive the compensation from our hotel. Although I know that money and the support from our hotel won't be enough to replace the gap that the families that have lost their loved ones will have, it would at least do something at the end of the day, Jack continued. The management staff was surprised by Jack's words again. Normally, it was the government that did the compensation because the matter here was related to the public security, and not the mistake that was made by the hotel. But at the end of it all, their boss had decided that he would also compensate the ones that had suffered losses here on this day. Okay. Each family of the ones that have had members of their families dying here, for those that were customers, they would receive a compensation of $10 million. The moment that the amount was mentioned, the crowd couldn't stay calm anymore. $10 million was something that they couldn't touch easily, even for them as the top management of a big hotel. But now, those families that had lost their loved ones that had come to dine in the hotel here would receive $10 million each. Just how rich was their boss? They couldn't help but ask themselves. As for the ones that were part of our staff members here, their families will receive $15 million each. If they have children, anything concerning their education and health will be taken care of by the hotel. Boom! Another bomb was dropped in the hearts of those that were listening. For a moment, they almost wanted to have their family members dying here in the hotel as part of the staff. But that thought was discarded in the next moment because none of them wanted to lose someone precious to them. Alright. That's with the compensation to the ones that have had their loved ones dying. Back to the normal employees of the hotel. You would all receive a bonus during the 1 week that you would be taking a vacation from work. As for the amount, the lowest that a person would receive would be $50,000. Jack ignored the shifting expressions and continued. The moment that he said this, they couldn't calm down at all. Although they were sad or frightened a moment ago, most of the people in the room had their mood elevated. $50,000 wasn't a small amount of money to the lower-level staff members. If the lower-level staff of the hotel could receive $50,000, then what about them, who were part of the top management staff? They wondered if there was going to be another attack on the hotel in the future. Perhaps they could receive even more money? If Jack knew what they were thinking, He would definitely make sure to fire every one of them and get another group of staff to take care of the situation here. But all the same, although he was giving out money, it wasn't that he hadn't thought things through. Since he was planning to monopolize the hotel sector, he could as well start things as early as now. By giving compensation, the reputation of the hotel that had dropped due to the deaths would surely rise a little. Although the aim of giving the compensation wasn't this, it was just a benefit that came with Jack's kindness. As for the bonus that he would be giving to his employees, that was something that he wanted to use to gain the trust of his employees. Although he was sure that not all of them would be loyal just because of the money, the ones that would be loyal were enough for him. Okay then, you will leave. But don't forget about what I said. I want to get all the information about the victims today. And I'll give you a warning. You better not try using this chance to cheat me. If you do that, your ending won't be good at all, Jack reminded. His voice was cold at the mention of being cheated. He knew that there were definitely profiteers that would try to get something from him by pretending to have someone that died being a member of their family. Right, once you come back, I would like to get all the necessary information about our competitors. Furthermore, you should be prepared to move the location of the hotel when you come back from the vacation, Jack stated. After giving a few more instructions, Jack thought that this was enough and decided to leave. As for the issues concerning the transfers that he had just mentioned, that was something that Denali would deal with. After all, there was just a lot of information that had to be dealt with and calculations that had to be added to that. That was something that Jack didn't want to touch for the moment because it reminded him of his campus life. Although it wasn't that he hated his campus life, he just didn't want to get involved with it for the moment. When they were leaving the building, Jack saw that Valnaro was waiting for him at the entrance of the hotel. This wasn't a surprise to him because Jack was sure that Valnaro hadn't seen how he had handled the guys here. "What's up, Captain?" Jack asked with a smile. Although the captain in front of him was a serious one to his soldiers, Jack didn't like the stiffness that came with the formalities. So, he would take things simple unless there was a need for him not to do that. Valnaro's lips twitched when he saw how nonchalant Jack was. He was sure that Jack knew why he was waiting here, but he was playing dumb. All the same, he was the one that wanted to get some information on Jack and not the other way round. So, he had to do what was needed regardless of Jack's attitude. "You sure hide a lot," Valnaro stated as he stared directly into Jack's eyes. Jack looked at him with a faint smile on his lips as he said, "It's not that I'm hiding a lot. It's just that I won't go around telling people about me. No. So, if you want to know about me, you can just ask." Valnaro asked, "What secrets are you hiding? How can they be considered secrets if I can share them with you? Furthermore, secrets are meant to be kept secret," Jack replied. "Hey, you said that I only had to ask." "I have asked but you are still hiding the truth from me," Valnaro pressed on. "Now, you are wrong. I never lied in the first place. I simply didn't tell you anything." Jack shook his head and responded. "Okay, I'll get straight to the point. What type of hackers do you have? Do you perhaps think that we can recruit them?" Valnaro asked. Although he was sure that there was no way that Jack would agree to that, he had to try his luck anyway. "Well, you should know that I didn't assemble a team so that I can make it easy for someone else to recruit them, right?" Jack asked in an amused tone. Before Valnaro could say something else, Jack continued, "Furthermore, there's no way that I can let you have an expert of mine. After all, I still need the expertise." After that, Jack left with Denali, not giving Valnaro a chance to speak further. Denali was a person that he had gotten with the help of the system due to the multiplier effect. He had won a bet against Austin. And as a result, he had received Ayush, who was considered a slave to Austin. With the multiplier effect on Ayush, he got Denali. And there was no way that he was going to allow someone to get his hands on her. At the end of the day, she was the one that was doing most of the things for him. If she suddenly left, he would be left with too many things that he would have to handle all by himself. He had just graduated a few months ago, so it would be better if he could relax for a while before going back to being serious all over again. Seeing that Jack was leaving, Valnaro could only shake his head in disappointment. If he could get his hands on the expert hacker from Jack's side, he was sure that the strength of his company would increase multiple-fold. That was just the power of those that played the support role. With an expert that could even spy on the enemy's plans, he could handle them after full preparations were made, with low chances of failure. "Robin, get the soldiers that are in charge of information to not transfer any information about Jack. I want to deal with this personally." Valnaro looked at the vice captain that wasn't beaten by Jack and instructed. "Yes, Captain." Robin replied before he took the communicator to pass the message. Although Jack could have used the helicopter to easily get to Eden Residential Building, he thought that he couldn't leave his car here. Furthermore, if there was something that was happening there, he could simply board the helicopter at any moment. When they got into the car, Denali wanted to drive but Jack stopped her. "Let me do this. You can go ahead and look into the data of Eden Residential Building. Look into the CCTV footage and see if there's any problem there," Jack stated as he took the wheel. "Yes, master." Denali nodded and got into the car. She had already gotten her laptop back from the car that she had used to get here. So, she immediately began doing what Jack had instructed. Jack then began driving towards the Eden Residential Building. It wasn't that far from the hotel. It was a 40 minutes drive to get there. Luckily, the area around was by now clear of a lot of cars. In other words, the jam that was there when Jack was heading to the hotel wasn't there at the moment. As a result, Jack was able to get to the Eden Residential Building in about 15 minutes. Well, that was after Denali confirmed that there was nothing wrong there. With this, Jack could confirm that there was nobody that was targeting him specifically. If there was something that was being targeted, then that would be the Glaze Hotel that was the main one. As for the branches that were spread out in other cities, those were confirmed to be okay at the moment. Although he wasn't sure that they would be attacked soon or not, Jack was planning to have Tracy organize for a group of mercenaries to head out so that they could work as the security there. Although they were going to be the security, they wouldn't need to stand around. They would only respond to the emergencies of the hotels. But of course, this was going to be the work of the ones that were not part of the special team. When they got in front of the building, Jack couldn't help but get amazed. The system was really something. It had easily awarded him with the building. After shaking the unnecessary thoughts from his mind, Jack took out his phone and made a call. He was calling the manager of the residential building. And as he made the call, he and Denali began walking around, trying to get familiar with the place. "Hello, boss." Elvis received the call the moment that he noticed that it was Jack was calling. "Where are you at the moment?" Jack asked. "I'm at the residential building management office," Elvis replied. "I'm currently on the first floor of the building. Could you perhaps tell me where this office can be found?" Jack asked. "Yes. It's on the topmost floor. Should I come and receive you?" Elvis responded before asking. "There's no need for that." Jack declined the offer and the two of them entered the elevator. They were heading to the topmost floor, the 50th floor. So, it would take them some time to get there even when they were using the elevator. The moment that they stepped out of the elevator, Jack noticed that there was a person that was standing in front of it. From the looks of it, he was waiting for it to be opened. He was a guy who seemed to be in his late 30s. He was currently wearing a plain white shirt, a black trouser and a black tie. He looked somehow nervous. The moment that Elvis saw Jack, he smiled broadly and welcomed him. "Hello boss, welcome." Jack simply nodded and looked around. Although he had never seen Elvis before, he could already tell that this was the guy due to the fact that he was here waiting for them. It was during the moment that they were getting out of the elevator that Elvis finally took notice of Denali. Not to say the least, he was enchanted by her beauty. This lady here, since Jack hadn't introduced Denali, Elvis knew nothing about her, so, he didn't know how to address her and neither did he know the relationship that she had with Jack. "That's Denali. She's my personal assistant," Jack stated the moment that he noticed that Elvis was looking at Denali. Although he could see that Elvis had some interest in Denali, Jack spoke no word about it. Even though Denali was his subordinate, she too had a life to live. So, if she found someone that she liked, that was her choice. So, he wouldn't intervene in her private issues. As for whether Elvis could actually catch Denali's attention, that was something that Denali herself would decide on. When Elvis heard that Denali was Jack's personal assistant, the fire of interest that was in his eyes was immediately extinguished. Although Denali was simply Jack's personal assistant, that was a level that he couldn't compare to. In other words, he was far inferior to Denali. So, even he himself didn't believe that she could get interested in someone like him. All the same, Jack was here for a reason. He didn't come to see how the tenants here were living. He was simply here to inspect if Elvis was someone that could be trusted with the responsibility of managing the building. Elvis then went ahead to do the introduction of the topmost floor. This floor wasn't meant for people to reside in. It was made so that it could be used as a warehouse. And besides the warehouse, there were 3 different offices amongst which was Elvis' office. After looking around for a while, Jack finally decided to leave, but as they got into the elevator, Jack looked at Denali who then shook her head. Denali shaking her head implied that Elvis wasn't good enough to continue maintaining his position as the manager. So, although he had yet to check how things were going on here, he would simply demote Elvis and have Denali bring another person in. After getting out of here, Jack decided to have Denali take the body strengthening solution. As what he would do next, that was to definitely get to Seline so that he could give her the pill that would help her recover the sealed memories. As for those that had followed them on a helicopter, they would have to head back to GVSL to continue training. Jack and Denali got into the car. He then gave her the solution that he was remaining with. He had carried several bottles with him so far, but he had taken one and given away the others. Denali was surprised as to why Jack had given her the solution. Just like him, she had thought that the solution would be ineffective on her. Although she was wondering if it would be effective, she still knew that Jack had given her the solution so that she could take it. So, she trusted his judgment and took the solution. A warm current flowed through her body, and before long, she felt the increase in strength. Before, she was akin to 6 men. By now, she was the same as 8 men. In other words, currently, Denali was stronger than Jack. Although it wasn't by a huge margin, she was still stronger. But Jack didn't know about that. All he knew was the fact that she was strong. Just like him, she didn't face the side effects of taking the solution. She was done the moment that she felt the increase in strength in her body. Now that this was out of the way, Jack parted with Denali. He let her continue with what she had to do because she had a lot on her plate currently. On the other hand, he took a cab and headed to where Seline was. He had already asked her and she told him that she was in the office currently. And that was definitely her mother's company. Although he didn't mind meeting Seline's mother, he wanted to do that after Seline received her memories. Not long after, Jack had arrived in front of a building. This was where Seline's cosmetics company was located in. The company was called Angel's Prominence. Although it was located in this building, the company didn't own the whole building. Instead, they simply owned 2 floors here. As for the warehouses, they were located in different places. Jack entered the building. He already knew that the company was located on the 17th and 18th floor. As for where Seline was at the moment, it was definitely the 18th floor. When he arrived at the 18th floor, he was stopped at the counter. He had to give the information on who he was here to see. "I'm here to see Seline," Jack stated. The lady behind the counter looked at him weirdly. Denali was definitely well known here as the only heir of the owner of the company. As such, she was someone who was greatly respected by those who were working here. Furthermore, there were a lot of people in the same cosmetic industry that knew about her. Since she was being trained by her mother, it was obvious that she had to discuss several business deals. The lady looked at Jack and wondered if he was one of the simps that always came here trying their chance of meeting with Seline. But, at least for the others, they always came with several means such as discussing about business with her and so on. But this guy here had simply come over and stated that he wanted to see her that directly. "Listen here, mister, it's not that I'm trying to look down on you or something. It's just that you will have to look for better ways of trying to hit on a girl," the lady stated. Jack on the other hand was surprised. What did she mean by saying that he was trying to hit on Seline? She was already his girlfriend to begin with. So, there was definitely no reason as to why he would try hitting on her. Instead, he could simply dote on her. At the end of the day, she was his girl and he had no intention of letting her go. "I'm not here to try hitting on her. I'm here to meet up with her. We have had an agreement to meet up here," Jack tried to explain. The lady's expression got weirder. It wasn't the first time that she had heard someone claiming that they had planned to meet with Seline. But at the end of the day, it turned out that they were simply lying their way out, trying to find a way to meet Seline. "If you are here to cause trouble, I'm afraid that I'll have to ask you to leave." The lady's expression wasn't looking good at all. If Jack had come here to discuss anything that was related to business, perhaps she might have made some considerations. But now, since Jack was here not for business but for Seline, she had no choice but to send him away. Jack sighed seeing that the lady had no intention of letting him in. That was simply the problem of trying to meet someone without having an appointment. He took out his phone and was just about to make a call to tell Seline that he had arrived when he suddenly heard a familiar voice. "What's going on here?" A lady's voice sounded. The lady who was behind the desk immediately turned serious. She then looked at the lady that had just appeared before pointing at Jack. "This young man here has come here claiming that he was here to see Lady Seline. But, he has got no proof of that. So, I'm suspecting that he is here to cause trouble," the lady stated. At this moment, Jack's eyes were fixated on the lady that had just appeared. Apart from her voice being familiar, her appearance was the same. She was none other than Caitlin. And, although Jack couldn't remember her name simply because he had never been told, he could still remember the time that she was there with his mother. He knew that she was Celine's mother. She had been there during their childhood and had spent time with him, third, only after his mother and Seline. And, Jack had to admit that Caitlin really had almost the same appearance as Seline. Other than the difference in terms of hair color, it could be said that the two of them were a copy of the other. But of course, there was a difference. One was young while the other was mature. Caitlin looked at Jack and was stunned for a moment. Since Jack was previously facing the desk, she hadn't seen his face. But now that he had turned around, she could clearly see the familiar face. Although Jack might have forgotten about her and Seline, she was different. The last time that she had seen him was when he was 13 years old. And although he had grown over the past 6 years or so, there was a fact that, other than his face maturing, there was no big difference at all. The handsomeness that he had been having at the age of 13 had only increased when he reached his current age. The same silver hair, the blue eyes that she was so familiar with. At the end of the day, Caitlin had never expected that she would see Jack this early. Jack? Is that really you?" Caitlin stuttered. Although she could tell that he was indeed Jack, there was actually the disbelief. Now, not only was Jack her daughter's playmate, but he reminded her of the friend that she had made back during the years. As for what had happened later on, she wasn't sure about that because she too had left with Seline when her memories of Jack were sealed. "Yes, it's me, Aunt." Jack smiled and nodded as he replied. "Aunt, that was how he used to call her back in the days before she disappeared from his memories." "Ha ha ha, so it really is you. To be honest, I never expected that you would be appearing here this soon." Caitlin laughed as she spoke. The lady behind the counter and the others that noticed her laughing were extremely surprised by what they were seeing. From what they could remember, Caitlin wasn't someone that could laugh here while she was at work. No, she was someone that was ever so serious about her work. And, that was what her daughter followed, or so they believed. As for the lady behind the counter, she was already sweating buckets. She had never expected that Jack and Caitlin had such a close relationship in such that he could call her aunt. In other words, Jack was speaking the truth about having an agreement with Seline to meet here. But, she was happy that she didn't say anything out of line. Otherwise, she would have been in for a good amount of trouble. But still, she knew that what would happen to her would depend on the two of them. If Jack took the situation seriously, she might as well be fired. "I guess you were here for Seline?" Caitlin asked. Although Caitlin had yet to know that Jack and Seline were the ones that she was trying to prevent from being together, she could still tell that he was here for Seline. At the end of the day, that was the agreement that they had had on the day that Jack's and Celine's memories got sealed. It was agreed that Jack would come to see Seline by at most when he was 20. And, if that time got past and he had yet to appear, Seline was free to do what she wanted. But of course, that would simply be because her memories would still be sealed. "Yes." Jack didn't hide this and nodded. "Okay then. I have a lot to talk to you about. But, you can go and look for Seline. She is in the office number 4. I'm currently busy with something. So, we will have to talk later about it," Caitlin stated. Jack nodded and headed towards the direction that Caitlin had pointed towards. When he got to Celine's office, Jack knocked. Although he would have so loved to simply get in there and get Seline before she knew that he was the one that had arrived instead of her subordinate, he still had to be official. He was in her mother's company at the end of the day. "Come in." Celine's nonchalant voice reached Jack's ears from the inside. From her tone, Jack could tell that she was serious. And, it seemed that she was busy with something inside there. Shaking his head, Jack pushed open the door and entered. He found that Seline was seated behind her desk, busy with some documents. He looked at her profile and he had to stare for a while. Seline had a different vibe when she was in the office as compared to the one that she always had when she was out. He didn't say a word and continued observing Seline. He was here to see her and give her the pill that would unseal her memories. But all the same, he might as well enjoy himself first. Seline, who was immersed with the documents that were filling her desk, was surprised why the person that had come over didn't say a word after a long while. She wasn't afraid that there was someone who had some bad intention would come to her office unnoticed, and since this person was here and there were no issues outside, she was quite relaxed. "What is it? If you have got nothing to say, you might as well leave." Without even raising her head, Seline said with an impatient tone. Jack smiled and remained silent. All the same, he approached the desk and sat in front of her, and the moment that he did that, Seline frowned. She had noticed him approaching, And when he sat down, that was something that showed that he didn't respect her authority in this office. She was just about to lash out at him when she was forced to have her mouth opening but no words flowing out. After a while, she took a deep breath and looked at Jack with a displeased expression on her face. "Why didn't you tell me that you had already arrived? I would have come to pick you up personally," she stated as she looked at him. "Hee, there's no need for that. Although I wanted to ask you about that. Aunt arrived just in time and she's the one that pointed me towards your office," Jack replied. Although he had been having a little problem meeting Seline due to the regulations that are placed at the counter, he didn't care about it because he had gotten what he wanted. When Seline heard him, she was stunned for a moment. Then, she looked at Jack with confusion clear on her face as she asked, "Who's that aunt that you are talking about?" Currently, Seline was wondering if there was Jack's relative present here in the company. And if that person was able to make Jack come to her office, then that person must have a good amount of authority in the company. Oh, I had forgotten about that. I was talking about your mother." Jack corrected himself. He had even forgotten about the fact that Seline had yet to recover her memories. In the end, she didn't know who the aunt that he was mentioning was. Jack's answer confused Seline further. She was now wondering if what Jack was saying was true. She knew her mother all too well. She wouldn't just allow any man to come and see her, especially during working hours. So, how could it be that she was the one that had actually allowed and even directed him to her office? "Are you sure you are talking about my mother? And why would you even call her aunt? I'm sure that this should be your first meeting, right?" Seline asked. "Well, it's kind of hard to explain. But all the same, there are things that you won't understand immediately. So, take this." As Jack spoke, he took out the pill that was left after he took one of them and handed it to her. Seline looked at Jack, the confused expression on her face deepening. Then, she looked at the small pill that was in Jack's hand. She didn't know what was going on anymore. "Jack, you should know that I'm not sick, right?" Seline looked at Jack and asked with raised brows. Jack was taken aback by Celine's question. He had completely forgotten that Seline knew nothing about the pill, unlike him who had received information about it from the letter that his mother had left him. So, he could only explain slowly. "I know that, all right. You wanted to know why I referred to your mother as aunt, right? Just take the pill and you'll understand." Although she was doubtful about his words, she still decided to take the pill. She had absolute trust that Jack wouldn't do something that would harm her in any way. It wasn't that she was blinded or something, this was something that came from the depths of her heart. "Should I use water?" she asked as she looked at the small pill in her hand. Although she had taken and seen several types of pills, the one that she was holding was one of the few that she had never seen, not to mention taken. "Just do as you would do with candy," Jack stated. The pill, for some reason, once it entered a person's mouth, it simply melted. So, there was no reason for the water or something. Seline took the pill immediately, and the moment that she took it, she felt it dissolving, and not long after, she felt that there was something that had happened the moment that the pill finished dissolving. And just then, something exploded in her mind. What followed immediately after that was the fact that a huge amount of information rushed into her mind. Though, there was nothing uncomfortable about it. It was as if she was recovering something that she had lost, a piece of her that was returning home. And then, images of Jack began appearing in her mind one after the other. But of course, these memories were from their childhood. Jack wasn't the only one that she remembered even a few of his half-siblings that she had met in the past. Seline found the moments that they had shared together. The two of them, she and Jack. The time that she would always look forward to the chance of heading to Crystal City so that she could meet with Jack. Then, it was at this moment that she finally realized something. She looked at Jack, who was looking back at her. She finally understood the reason as to why she felt familiar with him. The reason as to why she was so open in front of Jack, unlike the other young men that she had met before. And the reason as to why she felt that the dance style that they had used during their dance in the banquet was familiar to hers. It was simply because she and Jack had trained together. This was the arrangements that were made by their mothers. In other words, the bond that she shared with Jack was so deep, unlike what she had believed. And, amongst the memories that she had recovered, it was just inside them that she realized the reason as to why Jack had referred to her mother as aunt. That was the same way that she used to refer to Jack's mother as well. Now that she could remember about Anne, she could confirm that the photo that Jonathan had shown to them back in Volant City was indeed hers. But now, she was extremely sad because she realized that she was dead. At the same time, several types of emotions surged into her heart and she really couldn't control herself anymore. Jack, who was waiting for Seline to go through the memories that she had recovered, was surprised that she suddenly began crying. This was something that was out of his expectations. Angel, could it be that she is facing some kind of side effects from taking the pill? Jack was worried. He got up from the chair that he was seated on and went towards Seline while asking the system about the situation. You should know that the system is not the one that gave the pill, right? Anyway, I'll help you this one time. There are absolutely no side effects that came from taking the pill. It's just that the emotions that were sealed due to the loss of the memories that caused them gave suddenly returned. And now, she's experiencing them again. Jack sighed in relief as he took Seline into his arms. Seline fell into his embrace as she cried out. But her cries were a mixture of sadness, anger, joy and confusion. Jack patted her head and allowed Seline to wet his shirt with her tears. He didn't say anything after knowing about what she was experiencing. Although he too had had the explosion of the emotions that had been sealed away previously, he was able to take things calmly. He wasn't affected by much because something that could have affected him that much was definitely the death of his mother. But his memories of his mother, since he was young till her death, were there to begin with. The only ones that he had lost were related to Seline. But at the end of the day, when he was recovering his memories, Seline was already his woman. After over an hour had gone by since Jack entered the office past, there was a knock on the door before the door was opened. Both Jack and Seline were surprised by the sudden intrusion of a person. But all the same, what surprised them the most was definitely that the one that had come in was Caitlin. Caitlin, who had just entered the office, was surprised by the scene of Jack holding Seline while she cried. Although it had already been some time since she began crying, she was still in Jack's arms, whimpering. Normally when she came to Celine's office, Caitlin wouldn't even knock on the door before getting in. But today, because she knew that Jack was here, she had decided to show a little etiquette. But all the same, she really didn't understand what was going on in here. Since she had seen Jack here, she knew that this had something to do with her agreement with Anne. But as to why Seline was crying in Jack's arms, that was a mystery to her. Could it be that she feels sorry that she had been trying to date another man and forgot about Jack? Caitlin began speculating about what was happening here. In the end, she didn't know that Jack and Seline were the ones that were dating before, and they were the ones that she was exactly trying to prevent from getting together. Can you tell me what is going on here? Caitlin asked as she took a seat on one of the chairs that were present in the office. She looked at the two of them, waiting for an answer. Seeing that her mother wasn't surprised by the fact that Jack was here and that he was holding her, but by the fact that she was crying, Seline got confused. But she confirmed that Jack was indeed directed here by her mother. Mom, could it be that you knew about me before? Although she had just recovered her memory, she didn't understand why she had lost them in the first place. Furthermore, she didn't know why she would only recover the memories only after she took the pill that Jack gave her. At this point, she was wondering if Jack had his memories all along and was simply playing around with her. But she didn't ask about that because she was still waiting for her mother to answer. Of course I knew. The two of you have been growing up together since you were young. Well, that was until when you were 13 that you separated till this day, Caitlin replied. And why were you crying? Caitlin asked. Seline, on the other hand, looked at her mother strangely. She couldn't understand why her mother was playing dumb. Of course she had recovered her memory and she knew for the fact that the two of them grew up together. But that wasn't what she was asking about. What she was asking about was definitely if she knew that she had lost her memories of Jack till this very day. She had actually forgotten about something important that came from her childhood. Mom, I'm not asking about that. I'm asking if you knew that I had lost my memories of Jack and his mother, Seline stated as she got out of Jack's embrace. You have already recovered your memories? Caitlin was surprised. Although she had mentioned about the two of them growing up together, that was simply because she was trying to hint at her that she and Jack were supposed to be together. Furthermore, she was sure that Jack already knew about Seline because of the way that he referred to her as aunt. But all the same, she didn't expect that Seline would recover her memories the moment that Jack arrived. Back then, after Celine's memories of Jack and all those related to him were sealed, she and Anne had agreed that they would give the two of them a timeline till they reached 20 years old. It wasn't that Caitlin was the one that had decided on the time, it was Anne. Although she didn't know why Anne had decided on that time, she decided to trust her anyway. But other than the fact that if Jack didn't come to look for Seline after the timeline got passed, for her to do whatever she wanted, Anne said nothing about Celine's memories of Jack and whatsoever. Now that she had heard that Seline had recovered, she was definitely surprised by that. She could simply link it to Jack. But all the same, she was happy that Seline was back to the state that she was supposed to be in. What? You weren't expecting that? Not only Seline. Even Jack was surprised that Caitlin didn't know that Seline would recover her memories when Jack got here. Of course I wasn't expecting that. Caitlin knew that things might get a little complicated, so she went ahead and gave her explanation about what had happened. She made sure to make things clear so that there would be no assumptions that would be made, and although she was sure that Jack already knew about it, she just explained in case there was something that he had missed. Is it that serious? Seline asked after Caitlin finished explaining. It surely is. As long as I can remember, Anne wasn't someone that would lie about something serious. Back then, that's before your memories of each other were sealed. She said that there was something serious that was about to happen, Caitlin stated. I'm not sure about what it was that she was talking about, but she had said that it was something big. And if the two of us were closer to her, we would get involved in something that would surely be risky. And, although I had tried convincing her that it wasn't necessary and that I would be together with her, she then told me that it was something that only she could handle. As for Jack, although he was the one that was closest to her, she said that nothing would happen to him. So, as I can see Jack here, I can only assume that what she was speaking about was true. But, there is something that I don't understand at all. But all the same, I think that whatever she was talking about was definitely something that caused her death. Caitlin finished. At this moment, Jack could see that she was sad. And, her emotions weren't fake ones as Jack could tell if she was simply acting. But what was confusing him was definitely the matter concerning his mother's death. That was exactly something that he had known about. His mother was killed by Marion, and he had already killed her. But he was wondering if it was true that his mother was afraid that Marion would try attacking Caitlin and Seline. Although Jack thought that it was possible, he doubted that she would take the risk considering the risk that was involved in offending the Gravy family. Alfonso family was definitely nothing in the eyes of the Gravy family. They would be destroyed the moment that they attempted something like that. But he still couldn't find an answer. It seemed that he would have to do a little more research about his mother's case. Then, Caitlin looked at Seline and asked, "Do you now understand why I was prohibiting you from the relationship that you mentioned to me?" Celine's mouth hung open when she heard that. But at the same time, she could only say that she was indeed a lucky girl. On the other hand, Jack was definitely surprised that there was a relationship that Caitlin didn't approve of. He wondered who it was that had beat him to it and dated Seline first before he was stopped. Hee, Seline chuckled. She then looked at her mother and asked, "Mother, do you even know who it was that I was dating that you decided to stop me from continuing?" It doesn't matter anyway. Although she was curious, Caitlin didn't think that it was necessary for her to know who it was that Seline was so adamant on dating. "Mom, it matters. After all, I was dating Jack. In fact, although you had said that you wouldn't approve of our relationship, I still considered myself his girl. And, that's exactly the reason as to why I told him where I was," Seline said with a smile. Ignoring the shocked expressions of the two, she continued. "I had wanted you to see him so that you could know who he was and that you not approving of our relationship wasn't the best choice. In the end, who knew that the two of us were fated? When he got here, you were actually the one that had sent him over to me. And, it turned out that the person that I'm dating is the one that I grew up with." Seline smiled at the end of it, enjoying the expressions that were on the faces of the two. But she didn't enjoy for long as just a few seconds later, the two of them recovered to her disappointment. Caitlin looked at Jack and asked, "When did the two of you meet?" This time, she wasn't curious about the time that they had met because she wanted to prevent them from being together. Instead, she was genuinely curious about something. "This should be the second month since we first met. After the sealing of our memories, of course," Jack replied. "Did you have your memories back then?" Caitlin asked. This was what she was most curious about. Even Seline looked at Jack, wanting to know about it. Jack simply shook his head in response. Then, he said, "I really had no memory of her at all. It was just that I felt familiar with her but I couldn't explain why. As for the memories, I only recovered them yesterday after I dropped Seline back at home." Caitlin laughed loudly and said, "I guess that the two of you are really meant to be together with each other. All the same, I won't say anything about your relationship anymore. You can move at your pace, but I hope that you don't go past the line before the right time." Seline blushed at her mother's words. But all the same, she looked at Jack with a happy smile on her face. Now that her mother had approved the relationship between the two of them, she didn't think that there would be any other obstacle that would stand in their path of love, or so she thought. "Mom, you should never doubt my eyes," Seline stated smugly. Caitlin simply laughed at that. But at the same time, She was thinking of something that was troubling her mind. I wonder what will happen with that young man. I hope that he doesn't do anything to the two of them. Otherwise, I would be willing to give up everything for their sake.